midnight screams.
Story 1. Hello all. Originally, I'm from West Virginia. I moved around between the Appalachian and the Midwest, some as a kid. Between the ages of 10 to 13, I lived in rural Kentucky, in the foothills of one of the oldest mountain ranges on the planet. I lived with my dad and my grams. We lived in what we call a holler. Think of it like a cul-de-sac in between a set of foothills. We lived in the middle of the neighborhood, with nothing but family on both sides. No one lived across from us or behind us because of the foothills. When I moved in, my grams had some rules I had to follow. At the time, I chalked them up to hillbilly stranger danger. There were things like don't mess around with the wild animals, don't go out into the woods alone. Then they got a little weird. Don't whistle. If you hear your name, don't answer and don't go to it. And if you see someone in the woods, you might know. No, you didn't, and just come home. This experience happened in August when I was 11. My dad and I had a mowed path through the tall grass and berry bushes to the left of the double wide we lived in. We camped out there a lot because it was close enough that we could check on my grams. Now, when you're in the woods, things are louder. Then you think you have animal life, bugs chattering, wind through the trees and grass. There was a stream that ran along the road you could easily hear. That night, we added the campfire to that list. My dad decided to go back up to the house, about a quarter mile, to get more beer and to check on grams. Before he left, he told me not to mess with the fire. After a few minutes of watching the fire, things started to get quiet, like real quiet. The wind had all but stopped, bug and animal sounds were all gone, and the stream sounded like it was miles away. I was getting uncomfortable even though I've been left at the campground before like this. Then, I started to smell and taste it. It was in the back of my throat out of nowhere, this awful metal tang. After a few more moments of dread, my dad came back. He was mad right away, said he could smell burning metal coming up the trail. He accused me of tossing beer cans in the fire. I told him I didn't, and even pointed to the fire to prove it. He said there was a storm coming in, and we needed to get back home, and he let it go. We left the tent and started our way back. Now the very cool, but very weird thing about lightning in woods, this dense, is when the lighting hits, it lights up everything, like the middle of the day, well up until the front of the trees. After the first set of trees is pitch black, there are no streetlights, and unless you have lights on your property, it's completely black. So it's pitch black, lightly raining, and other than the dim lights from the house windows, there's nothing. I'm eating watermelon as one dose in August in the mountains when the first clap of lighting hits. Everything is as bright as it can be. After the second passes, it's black as pitch aging. Next clap of lighting comes, and that's when I kind of see it. On the porch, past the yard, over the stream, past the road and the ditches on either side, just past the first line of trees, I could see the silhouette of it. Then it goes dark. This is also when I can't start to taste that same awful burning metal. I'm not really sure what I saw, so I just kind of stay still. It's a few moments before the lighting hits aging. The figure is now closer, standing side by side to the trees. Then it's back, aging. I'm standing now, not sure what to do. It's been 20 years to this day, and I've tried, but could never fully describe what I saw. This thing's head wasn't proportioned to its body. The arms were too long, and the torso didn't fit right. It was like if you asked a blind person to draw what a person looked like. It just didn't look correct. Once the lighting hit aging, The thing is standing in the middle of the road. Not wanting to see this thing get any closer, I go inside. My Grams is doing dishes and asks why I'm inside. I tell her I think I saw something. She almost immediately gets my dad on his feet, telling him to shut and lock all the windows and doors. My dad, vaguely drunk, obeys. That night I sleep with her. The next day we discover the tent door is torn off. It didn't look like an animal. Things weren't cut or shredded, but looked like someone took and pulled it apart. My uncle, who lived a mile or so up, had all 8 chickens killed. Heads gone, no blood. The next few weeks, all the kids had to wait for the bus with an adult. My dad had to be late for work for almost 3 weeks. Anytime I tried to talk about it, I just had the subject change. I just figured I was a kid and it wasn't important or real. It wasn't until years later I finally understood. I was in my early 20s and some cousins were in town for Halloween. As I was telling the story, my aunt got irate with me, saying, "Don't you tell them that. Don't you put that evil on them." After I couldn't help but think back on all the times I tried to talk about it and how I was shunned. My kid mind not realizing it wasn't as simple as a subject change, but then actively shushing me. Once I started dipping my toes in Reddit, I realized there was a name for this fucking thing. The same name my auntie had called it that day at the party, and other people have seen it. The Goat Man. What bothers me the most is how to this day I couldn't describe any feature, nor have I ever tasted that awful burning metal taste. So friends, if you ever find yourself in the foothills of Kentucky, please remember my Grams rules. Story 2. For the past 18 years, not including 3 years in college, I've lived in a remote part of the Appalachians. Cell phone service is virtually non-existent at my house, and using the internet requires a 30-minute trip to the local library. Despite the isolation of the area, I've always considered it a tranquil and safe place to call home. With so few people around, there's nobody to commit crimes in the first place. Home is a vast expanse of rolling greenery, which in the fall becomes a wild display of reds, oranges, and yellows, like the embers of a slowly dying campfire. I never could have comprehended the primal terror that this breathtaking landscape could conceal until last night. As a senior pre-med student, I've got a busy schedule. Endless hours of labs and class, followed by nerve-wracking evenings spent trying to be accepted somewhere, string out my nerves to their last fiber. When I saw an opening in my calendar, I felt compelled to return to the primal beauty that nurtured my nascent mind. Thankfully, my lovely girlfriend of 2 years also had an open weekend, so I felt a surge of excitement at the prospect of sharing my home with her. We meandered our way to the mountains late Friday afternoon, with our windows down, bathing ourselves in the crisp fall air. After about an hour of driving, the mountain I call home came into view. As one of the largest in our area, its gently sloping base culminated in a rocky backbone which snaked its way into the distance. I shifted my car into 4-wheel drive, and we began the long crawl up the rocky trail that can be loosely termed my driveway. We meandered gradually through the depths of the forest until my house came into view. More specifically, my guest house. Located about a 1/4 mile from my main home, the guest house is the home we keep spotlessly clean for company, a stark comparison to our more cluttery main home. A gentle rain fell, which accented the sweet, earthy smell of the forest as we brought our bags inside. My parents greeted us, and we enjoyed a brief home-cooked dinner with plenty of small talk and laughs. Around midnight, my parents let us be, and we made ourselves cozy. A city girl her whole life, my girlfriend is fascinated by the outdoors and animals. More specifically, she loves listening to the mournful howls of coyotes. Naturally, being a mountain man, I long ago mastered the art of screeching out realistic howls and barks. On most nights, I can easily lure some lonely pack of coyotes to respond back. We huddled around my bedroom window, and I let out a few howls. My girlfriend winced at the loudness and ridiculousness of my efforts, and we waited for a response. Nothing. I tried again, and nothing but the echo of my own voice responded. Maybe it's too cold, I thought. On a cold, rainy night, the coyotes are probably huddled inside their caves and crevices, trying to sleep away the rough weather. Suddenly, something answered my howls. Coyotes can make some strange sounds, but this was different. A shriek echoed out the hollows, almost human-sounding, but too high-pitched and piercing in tone to be produced by a human larynx. "What the fuck?" I gasped. My girlfriend hopped up in fright. "What was that?" she asked in a nervous voice. "Bobcat, maybe," I replied. I howled once more and waited. Again the shriek split the cold, foggy air of the forest, though this time much closer. I reached for my flashlight and shone a beam of pale LED light through the depths of the mist-filled air. I swung the beam around searching, and just at the edge of the beam I saw something unimaginable. As a keen student of biology, I have a broad knowledge of vertebrates and invertebrates, and this was something different. It stood on two legs, covered in patchy hair, that culminated in cloven feet like a deer's. Its upper body was almost humanoid again, covered in patchy hair. The skin of its abdomen clung tightly to its exposed ribs, an undulating vertebrae. On top of this anorexic-looking frame sat a head that looked at once human and at once animal, with branches of sharp antlers coming out from the back of its head. The beast loped with a supernatural litheness upon its bony legs, and it seemed to be making its way to the porch. "Go the fuck. Upstairs, Anna," I said with a faltering voice. Anna sprinted out of the room and up the stairs while I grabbed my trusty shotgun. I made my way to the living room, which attached to the porch, and shined my light through the window on the door. My beam was met with eyes that would scare the soul from your body. The eyes were empty and pale like those of an aged hound with cataracts, but they were alive with a sort of ancient energy, and they gazed straight through my terrified, adrenaline-soaked brain. The walls of the house reverberated with a deafening explosion as I began unloading my shotgun on the door, and my flashlight fell to the floor. It seemed almost sacrilegious to be shooting at those eyes, but they stared at me with such a demonic and otherworldly aspect that I could not begin to understand their motives. Screams punctuated the roar of my 12-gauge thunder. Screams from both the beast and my traumatized partner hiding upstairs. The eyes vanished in the hail of 00 lead that I unleashed. Silence came as abruptly as the roar of the shotgun had moments before, and I frantically called my parents from the home phone. "Some night you had," my dad chuckled in the morning. "Yeah, never seen a bear that close to the house," I squeaked out. Kinda pissed about the door, but a bear like that can't be left alone. "Sorry, poor Anna is too scared to stay the rest of the weekend," my dad said, still jovial. "We're back at school, and I have no idea what to do." My parents would think I was crazy if I told them the truth behind this weekend, but I can't leave them there with that thing. Something that paranormal doesn't seem as though it would die at the volley of a shotgun. Maybe posting this on Reddit will help me clear my mind and figure out how to deal with this. Story 3. I grew up in southern Appalachia, Appalachia, in western North Carolina, 30 minutes outside of the town of Asheville. The hills and hollers of the Appalachian Mountains are some of the oldest mountains in the world, with some of the rock formations dating back over 1 billion years. That quite literally means they were here before there were terrestrial animals. As with most things that have been on the earth a long time, there are inexplicable anomalies, both benevolent and malevolent. For example, the brown mountain lights. Never in my life have I felt threatened or uneasy when witnessing them from Wiseman's view. They're neither good nor evil. They just are. On the benevolent side, sometimes when you walk through an abandoned old church up near mom and dad's property line, you can feel good, warm, and happy energy. It's like that first warm day of summer when the sunshine is not too hot but it's not cold. Well, the story is not about one such anomaly. It's about something that was definitely malevolent. About a decade ago, I was in night school up at AB Tech, going to school for automotive mechanics. I would go into class at about 2 p.m. after I got off my part-time job, and I would end up getting home about 10:30 p.m., depending on traffic. Every night I drove the same road in my old 1973 W200 Dodge pickup. Some nights it would get rather boring and I would take a different route, jump off of I-40 and drive the back roads. On this particular evening, I had decided to just stay on I-40 because I just wanted to go home and go to bed. It was Thursday, and there was no class on Friday, and I wanted to get in bed early so I could go out into the woods and go hiking early tomorrow morning and watch the sun come up. As I jumped off of I-40 onto the exit where my parents lived, the night seemed to get darker, and none of the animals that I could hear through my rolled-down windows made any more noise. The cab of my truck became smaller and smaller, and my breathing quickened. I have never faced any kind of anxiety in my life, but at that moment, something felt off, and there was no way I could put my finger on what it was. I came to a stop on the exit ramp, turned to go down the road, and I happened to notice that the gas station off the exit where Mom and Dad lived had no lights on. They were a 24-hour truck stop and always had lights on, but I didn't think about it again after noticing. I just chalked it up to the power being out, but I could not shake the feeling that something was definitely askew. I slowly shifted through all of my old truck's gears, not wanting to make any more noise than an old pickup already did. I leaned over my steering wheel to look up at the moon through the windshield, and there were barely any stars visible, which was way out of the ordinary. If you've ever been to Appalachia, primarily the sparsely populated areas where I'm from, you can see the Milky Way on clear nights. An absence of stars back home is only due to cloud cover or whatever in the hell went on this particular night. As I rounded a particularly sharp left-hand curve and chugged through a straight stretch before the next right-hander, I looked at the ancient, decaying barn I always gazed at when riding that stretch of road and thought about how long that thing had been here and how many advancements in civilization it had seen. For the split second that my gaze wandered, a very large, sickly-looking dog ran out in front of my truck, no more than 10 feet in front of me. Ole Betsy was a good truck, but she didn't stop well. Thump, thump. I heard the fence posts I had left in my truck bounce up out of my bed and then back into it as I slid to a stop. My first thought was, oh God, now I have to go tell these neighbors that I ran over their dog. That shit doesn't go real far with people around here. It can really kind of set them off depending on the dog and the person. As I sat there, breathing in the smell of burning rubber, something else found its way into my nose. The stench of rotting flesh. It's not a smell you ever forget once you smell it one time. I didn't pay much attention to it at the time. I just chalked it up to some rotting roadkill nearby. Finally, I thought to myself, let me go check and see who this dog belongs to. I pushed my clutch in, shifted to reverse, and as I looked in my rearview mirror, illuminated by the haunting glow of my reverse lamps, was the same dog, only it wasn't on 4 legs anymore. It had stood up, like a man well over 10 feet tall. Only then did it dawn on me that the front of my truck was every bit of 5 feet tall, and this dog was every bit of 5 feet tall at the shoulder on all 4s. As it turned its head to look in the direction of my truck, I caught only a glimpse of this creature. It was not a dog, it was not a man, it was somewhere in between and at the same time entirely separate altogether. Its skin hung loose off of his emaciated and thin frame, like a raccoon. Bits of matted fur and dirt and mud clung to his legs like a disease. The right arm seemed a little longer than the left, and they both hung abnormally low, in relation to either animal this creature seemed to be. As it regained its senses, it turned and looked into the mirror like it knew exactly where I was sitting. The face was that of a man's, but the very edges of its face seemed to not be totally defined. They seemed to move and change, like something you would see at a cellular level in a scientific documentary. There were no eyes, but only sockets where eyes should have been. No hair in the skin that was dripping off. Its face was a cold, lifeless gray color. The nose was short and shoved into its face, like a bulldog, but the teeth still haunt me. It was definitely carnivorous, and true to form of the rest of its unnatural look. Many of the teeth didn't seem to be arranged in a natural way in its mouth. They seemed to fill and spill forth from the indefinable face, almost like they knew the horror they occupied and they were searching for a way out. It stared through my life, into my eyes, and past my soul. It seemed like an eternity, but it could not have been more than 5 seconds that I sat there, paralyzed. A light came on at the house next to the road, causing the creature to snap its gaze in that direction and tear off into the woods on its back 2 legs, like a man. I jammed my old truck in first gear and roasted tires all the way through first, snatched second gear, and drove as fast as I could home. When I got to the house, both of my parents were asleep. I went downstairs into my bedroom and loaded every firearm I possessed and locked all of the doors. I couldn't wake them up. Who the fuck would believe that? And at 10:30 on a Thursday night. The basement was eerily quiet that night. Even their dogs, that got up to raise hell at outside animals at all hours of the night, were dead silent. The Ole post and beam house didn't even creak or pop that night, as was usual, at about 3 a.m. I started to finally get drowsy, and as I went to lay my head down to get some sleep, so I could still attempt to go hiking the next morning, I smelled the stench of death again. It was faint at first, but it was definitely there. I thought to myself, you're just going crazy. None of that shit was real. But as I dwelled on it, it became more and more noticeable until it filled the entire basement. My dad has a home office in the basement with 2 large glass doors that face Pisgah National Forest and impenetrable 500,000-acre woods. I finally worked up the courage to walk out of my bedroom and into the basement living room. With my little tactical 12 gauge, loaded, tack light, on. I covered the flashlight with my hand so as not to make my presence known until need be, and as I turned right out of the living room into my father's office, I shined the light through the glass doors, and at the edge of the woods, there stood the creature. It was motionless. It stared right into the light, unafraid, with those soulless sockets, devoid of eyes. I quickly covered my tactical light, ran into the living room, flipped on the outdoor floodlights. To my surprise, it was no longer standing at the edge of the woods, but between the house and the edge of the woods, still motionless. I swung the door open and fired every round I had in its direction. I must have scored a couple of hits because it screeched an unearthly scream, like that of a woman being slaughtered, as it took off into the woods. The dogs went crazy. Mom and Dad woke up asking me what the hell I was doing. I told them that a bear had gotten into the trash and I was scaring it away. They didn't believe me, but I knew they wouldn't believe the truth either. I didn't sleep that night, or any time until the following Sunday. Everything seemed to return to normal, and I didn't think about the creature again until I met my wife about 6 years later. Her mother's house sits at the mouth of the holler, no more than 4 or 5 miles up the road from my mother and father's. Up on the side of the holler, there are kennels for her brother's hunting dogs. No longer in use, and haven't been in years, but the fence is still there, and the concrete pad is still there. It's a thing of great use when you need to quarantine an animal. Her Great Pyrenees had gotten into a tussle with a raccoon, which of course he destroyed, but his rabies vaccination had lapsed, so we had to keep him quarantined for a time. It didn't bother him. He kind of liked solitude. This particular night that we were coming home from a movie date in a neighboring town was the last night of quarantine for him. So we walked up the trail using our phone flashlights to get to the kennel, and there he, Saturday, patiently waiting, tail wagging happy to see us. We put him on a leash and started walking back to the house with him. As we were walking back through the darkness, I started to feel the same feeling I had felt the night I hit the creature in my truck. I didn't say anything so as not to alarm my wife, but then the smell came, wafting in on the breeze. She jokingly asked me, "My God, what did you eat? You stink." I half-assed laughed, not being able to fully appreciate the joke for the horrors that raged within my mind. She immediately caught on and asked me what was wrong, to which I could only reply, "I'll tell you later." She grew up in the woods and around hunting and things of that nature her whole life, so she knew what I meant. She knew we were being watched by something. When we could see the lights of the house from the trail to the kennel, we heard it. There came barking from the kennel that sounded just like the Great Pyrenees we had on a leash next to us. It was a perfect imitation. The Pyrenees, being a guardian dog, immediately sensed that something was wrong, and so he turned to face the danger, belting out deep barks and growls in that direction. I don't know if you've ever had to drag a 150-pound dog, but it sucks and is no easy task. I'm 6 feet tall and 240 pounds, and it was all I could do to get him back to the house. The barking never ceased the entire time we're running towards the house. In fact, it seemed to grow closer and closer until it seemed it was coming from inside my own head. Her mother heard the commotion and flipped the floodlights on as we made it into the fence of the yard, and I caught a glimpse of something coming to a dead stop at the end of where the light reached, wheeling around and tearing off back into the darkness. My wife looks at me and goes, "You want to tell me what the fuck that was?" To which I replied, "Yes, let's go inside." I told her the story, and she listened intently, hanging on every word. Her family came from a long line of granny witches and other supernatural healers of the Appalachians, so her older sister came over the next morning with some herbs and chants to bless the property and to ward off evil. I suggested we go up to the dog kennels and do them as well. When we got to the kennels, they were completely destroyed. The very concrete foundation was cracked, and the chain-link fence was torn off of its posts. The dog houses were destroyed, and the place reeked of the stench that followed the creature. My wife's older sister just went about her business like normal, blessed the place, burned some herbs, and led us back into the property. When we got in the house, she wheeled about on us suddenly and instructed us very firmly to never go into the woods after dark. Not until this thing left me alone. To make a long story short, my wife joined the military and she ended up getting stationed in Delaware. Well, as someone who's lived around fairly large mountains and endless wilderness their entire life, Delaware is pretty terrible. At least, that was my thought when we first moved into the middle of a 50,000 plus population city. Fortunately, though, it didn't take us long to find a house in a sleepy little community. Further south, we purchased the house and moved in with haste. We were both very grateful and glad to be out of the city and into a rural setting again. The land in Delaware seems lifeless in comparison to Appalachia. The sparsely populated woods don't possess any energy that goes one way or the other. The ground doesn't seem to be alive like it is in Appalachia. Having not thought about the creature in a long time, I resumed my staying outside after dark and playing with our dogs in our rather large yard that borders a small patch of woods. Well, last night I went outside to play with the dogs, and as dark set in, I built a decent-sized fire in my fire pit and consumed some good old-fashioned Appalachian Mountain cough syrup from a mason jar. And just as the fire was dying down, my American bulldog tore off towards the woods. He has a habit of running off to go on adventures, so my immediate instinct was to chase him down in the yard and tackle him so he could not get away. As I tackled his 110 pounds ass to the ground and threw him in a fireman's carry over my shoulders, I heard him begin to bark. Only the bark was not coming from him. The only sound coming from him was a deep, rumbling growl, a noise I've never heard him make. It was a threatening noise. Something was definitely wrong. And as I ran with him on my shoulders back to the house, the stench of death again began to fill the air. The two other dogs must have caught wind of what was happening and met me at the back door, which I threw open, slammed shut, locked, and again loaded my firearms. How the hell could this thing have followed us 650 miles up here? As I flipped my floodlights on, at the back side of my house, several of the bushes and small trees at the forest's edge were still shaking like something had just run through them. My dogs went crazy all night, barking and howling, and attempting to get out the windows. I didn't sleep a bit, and I don't think I will for a while. I know for sure I won't be in the woods after dark ever again in my life, not until this thing is gone. Story 4. I don't like to use the term skinwalker to describe the hellspawn that wander the Appalachian Mountains. I say this because the only people that believe in skinwalkers are the ones who have actually seen them. I sure as hell didn't believe in any such thing until about 2 weeks ago. The Appalachian Mountains had always been a place that I wanted to visit. The pictures on Google were enough for me. The place is fucking beautiful. I had heard a few stories about skinwalkers roaming around the mountains during the night, which just made it all the more interesting. So, I saved up some money, rented a cabin, and flew out here to experience the mountain lifestyle for a couple of weeks. The first few days were completely normal. I had gotten settled in and felt completely fine. Hiking some surrounding trails is all that I can recall for the first 3 or 4 days. It was on that 5th day that everything began going to shit. The cabin that I had rented had 2 big floodlights facing the backyard. Every night a coyote would walk past my cabin, causing the lights to turn on. I thought nothing of it. It was honestly kinda cute. On the 5th night of my stay, I was sitting in the living room watching some satellite TV. In the corner of my eye, I saw the floodlights flick on. I jumped up to go see my new coyote friend through the window. Let's just say that whatever caused my floodlights to turn on that night was not a fucking coyote. Its body looked completely normal except for the legs. The legs were extremely long and skinny, probably 3 times longer than any normal coyote. The thing just stared at me. My fight or flight didn't kick in. All I could do was stare back into its empty eyes. This fucking creature then let out the loudest, most blood-curdling scream I've ever heard, then got even closer to the window. I turned around to grab my phone so I could call the police. As I was walking to the couch, the floodlights turned off. The soft glow of the old TV screen was the only thing lighting the living room. I grabbed my phone and sprinted upstairs to my room. My first instinct was to hide in the closet, so I did just that. The closet doors had little slits in them, so I could kinda see what was going on outside. I picked up my phone and tried to call the police. There was one slight problem, though. My phone was fucking dead. It was around this point that I heard knocking coming from my front door. The knocking continued for what felt like an hour. I literally had no idea what to do, so I just sat there, hoping that it would stop. It eventually did stop, but shortly after, I heard the door open. No kicking the door in or anything. It just opened. I started to cry. I could hear faint footsteps getting louder and faster as it went up the stairs. It eventually got to my room, where I thought I was dead for sure. I could hear it opening drawers and messing with my bed sheets. I peered through one of the slits in the door, but I couldn't really see anything. That was until the creature put its disgusting, rotting face right up against the door. It was breathing so loudly that it was hurting my ears. I pushed myself back into a corner and used one of my jackets to cover me. It was my last option. I don't know how long I sat there, but it felt like an eternity. I eventually peeked out from behind my jacket to see some light coming through the doors. I stood up and looked out. It was daytime. I couldn't hear the creature anymore. I assumed that it got spooked by the sunlight and left. I slowly opened my closet door. It was finally safe. Needless to say, I got the fuck out of there, and I'm never going back. I don't want to see a therapist because they won't believe me. They'll think I'm insane. Maybe I am insane, I don't know. All I know is that whenever the locals of the Appalachian Mountains talk about these things, they aren't lying. Story 5. Do not visit rural Appalachia. For starters, this is off the record. I wasn't here. I will give a fake name. I will give fake locations. If anyone tries to contact me, I will do what I have to protect my family. This is a warning, nothing more. Do not travel to rural Appalachia. My name is Depu. Well, it's Hoover. I'm a former sheriff's deputy. I'm 29 years old, and I'm already retired with a full pension. It's hush money, really. I'm putting my family and livelihood at risk by posting this. but I can't stomach the thought of some dipshit city slicker going to those mountains and it happening to them. Was a deputy for Unicoi County, Tennessee. It's a gorgeous place. Watching that sunrise over the mountains was an almost spiritual event. I never thought I would leave until it happened. It happened the fall of last year. Strange because I remember it was particularly crisp, beautiful autumn. The leaves had changed and the entire valley was surrounded by an enchanting sea, awash with reds and hues of orange. I was at the station filling out some paperwork and drinking my evening coffee with Richards, my partner. He was a good guy, new in town as he and his family had just moved from Montgomery, and I took him under my wing. He was kind of deputy who stick his neck out for you. He didn't mind putting in the extra hours so you could leave early. He was my best friend. Around 7, we got a call for a 130, code for a dead body up the mountain in a campsite. That's not particularly surprising. Unicoi is well known for its population of bears and bobcats. It typically would happen once or twice a year that some hotshot yuppie would come in with 10 grand of worth of equipment and get mauled by a predator while cooking. When we got to the campsite, I'm pretty embarrassed to say, my first thought was to give whoever it was a little bit of credit. They picked an amazing spot with a view over the entire valley, but then I saw them. There wasn't one body, there was 5. 1 adult man and 1 female with 3 little girls. The man was leaned up against a tree next to their tent. His head was so slashed to hell I could see chunks of skull jutting out of the mound. That was his face. The woman didn't fare much better. She was shredded. Her torso and head was about 3 feet from the tent, with some jumbled mush I imagine was probably her legs laying a few yards away. It was sickening and the hardest part of the job, but I didn't realize this was something else until we found the girls about 100 yards away. They were stacked, well, what was left of them, neatly on a rock down the slope of the mountain. Their organs and dismembered body parts painted the boulder red with still drying blood. Deputy Davis, who made the call, was nowhere to be found. It was getting dark, the kind of suffocating darkness that swallows you and doesn't let you breathe. What or who ever did this was still out here. I told Richards we needed to get back to the truck and call in, back up, and a rescue team to look for Davis. As Richards and I started back up the slope, I saw it. Sitting on a branch of an old oak tree near him was a woman, or what I thought was a woman, with gray cold skin and a sinister crooked smile. Before I could even speak, she had already pounced, savagely screaming and slashing with her demon-like talon that forked unnaturally from her hand. I drew my service pistol and fired 8 times in a tight cluster in her side. She didn't even so much as pause her rampage. I think it's Richard's screams that haunt me the most. His whimpered howls reminded me of a coyote caught in a trap, an animal who knows it's about to die. I could see the tears streaming down his blood and sweat-soaked face. His eyes were bloodshot and bulging. I froze. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't even process what I was seeing. Some sort of demon from hell itself who came to slaughter. Something unnatural. She finally stopped and turned towards me. When I became a deputy, I knew that I could die on duty, but I couldn't fathom it was be from something like this. I'm ashamed to admit, at that moment, I had accepted my death. I turned my service pistol at my head and was about to pull the trigger to avoid a fate like Richard's when she was just gone. Like that. Like mist in the air. leaving me alone with the corpse of my closest friend on the slope of the mountain. As I carried his bloodied carcass up of the mountain to the truck, all I could see was that scene in my head. It seared into my mind. When I called for backup, instead of the sheriff's office, several large black vans showed up, filled with unidentified men in suits. I was told to quit my job, move, and to never speak of what happened, and I would receive a hefty retirement package. I took the deal. I don't know why she didn't kill me. It haunts me. I can't sleep. I can't eat. All I see is her ripping apart. Richards. The day before I left, I spoke with some Cherokee elders, and they told me it was something they call Utlungta, a demon who stalks the Appalachians hunting her prey. Whatever it was, I'm begging whoever reads this, don't go visit the Appalachian Mountains. It's not worth it. Don't let her get you too.